Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and we'll get things started. First, welcome to this evening's webinar presented by Bank First. My name is Deb Weicker, and I will be moderating this evening's webinar for you. Tonight, we will be covering a very important topic, which is how to protect your personal identity and accounts from fraud. Unfortunately, fraud continues to be a growing trend despite the environment that we're in. Of course, it's important that we all continue to educate ourselves on what types of scams are out there, what steps you should take if you think you've fallen for a scam, and what tools or resources are available to you to use for added protection. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. First, if you are experiencing any audio issues, we do have a call-in number that sometimes it tends to work best by using your phone versus your computer. So we have that on the screen right now. Next, all attendees will be muted during the webinar. So if you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the questions panel. It's typically located on the right-hand side of your screen. We will pause throughout the webinar to read and answer any of your questions that you may have. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, and a link of the recording will be emailed to you following the webinar, and you will also find it on the Bank First website if you ever want to go back and re-reference this. Please allow me to introduce to you our presenter for tonight, Dave Oldenburg. He's fraud officer, joined Bank First back in September of last year. Dave is responsible for the development and maintenance of the bank's fraud risk management program, which detects, prevents, and deters fraud. He has over 20 years of banking experience, including 17 years of specialization in security matters. Prior to joining Bank First, he was responsible for the oversight of various financial crime investigations, physical security, robbery response, and fraud mitigation efforts. He is a member of the Wisconsin Association of Fraud Investigators and Financial Crimes Investigators of Greater Madison. Dave, thank you for presenting, and I'm going to be turning it over to you now.
Well, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here to talk about some of the emerging fraud trends that we see that are affecting consumers. And obviously, it's not an all-inclusive list of fraud, but we wanted to kind of focus on the kind of the top three that we've been seeing for quite some time that are trending, and give a little bit of explanation as to how those fraud schemes work, and ultimately how to protect you and your accounts from fraud. With the trending items that you're seeing here, we're going to discuss fake check schemes, which is somebody that is essentially sending you a check that is worthless, and in return, they are requesting that money be sent elsewhere. The second item that we'll talk about are overpayment scams, in which victims are convinced to ultimately wire funds to a fraudster, which obviously can cause a loss to our customer. And lastly, I wanted to cover a little bit regarding unemployment CARES Act fraud, which is essentially money mule activity. This has been ratcheting up quite a bit in light of COVID-19 times. So we'll talk a little bit about how that's working, how the fraudster utilizes money mules to perpetrate the fraud. Common fake check scams that we're seeing on a fairly regular basis are individuals that are soliciting things like car wrap advertisements. It may be a situation where somebody reaches out to you via text or via email or some other means, and they are convincing victims to be a part of a marketing advertisement campaign, which involves wrapping a vehicle. And we'll talk a little bit about how these things work in general. The work from home type schemes are really trending upward right now, especially as people are pressed for money or maybe have a job loss, that type of situation. So we're really seeing that quite a bit more than in past years. We also see things like secret shopper schemes, where fraudsters are reaching out to individuals to create a secret shopper task or perform a secret shopper job for them, and they get paid by check in exchange for sending money or other stored value back to the fraudster. And there's also things like items listed for sale, like victims' listings on Craigslist, Facebook marketing, those types of sites as well. Or individuals that reach out via online dating or friends that simply need help moving money. And the thing to look at here is that all of these things that they have in common is somebody is sending you a check, a fake check, in return for providing money to someone else. That's the thing that they all have in common. If that ever happens to you, or if you ever encountered that situation, you can be rest assured that that is a scam situation. And next slide, please. Some of the basic anatomy of how the fake check scams work are as follows. A victim is convinced to essentially accept a check into their bank account for payment. And that could either be the victim depositing, can that go back one more slide, please? Very good, thank you. That could either be deposited by the victim directly into their bank account, or the victim may remote deposit the item into their account, or they might be convinced to give up their online banking credentials so the fraudster can actually deposit a check via remote deposit. What the victim is told is that they get to keep a portion of the funds for their work or to pay a shipper, whatever the fraud scheme may be. And the average check amounts that I typically see on these cases is anywhere between $1,200 and $4,900. So they can vary. Sometimes they're larger, but those are the average ones that I'm typically seeing. And once a check has quote unquote cleared, the victim will go ahead and send those funds to someone else. It'll be under the guise of being a shipper or an advertiser or some other third party. And the victim is promised that they can keep a portion of that check as payment for providing that service or doing that person a favor. These are we're continuing to see more and more of these things. In fact, a lot of times the fraudsters are even using the term cleared. They'll say, yeah, wait till the item has cleared or funds are available, and then you can go ahead and send us payments. And incidentally, as financial institutions, on average, really don't know whether the check or not is good until it's returned to the bank unpaid. And that could be, on average, it's about 3 to 5 days, depending on the situation or a correspondent bank that may be involved. And next slide, please. The payment instructions are evolving. Years ago, it used to be predominantly cash withdrawals, ATM withdrawals, maybe gift card sent or other stored value. But now we're seeing kind of an evolution of that because of the technology that's out there. We have cash, electronic Cash App type of transfer mechanisms like Venmo or Cash App. That make it very easy to instruct the victim to immediately send funds. Or we're seeing a trend where the fraudster is actually requesting that the victim go ahead and purchase cryptocurrency on their behalf. So these things are starting to evolve, and what that means is that the fraudsters can get the money even faster and even more anonymously than before. So at the end of the day, with this fraud, the funds are liquidated by the victim because they've been instructed to do so, and the check is ultimately returned unpaid, which leaves the account holder with a negative balance. So because the check is no good to begin with, it just simply comes back, and it comes back after those funds have been liquidated. So that leaves customers potentially in a victim situation. Next slide, please. The online job scam red flags, these are becoming pretty common, where it could be either the victim responds to some like a Craigslist ad or some other want ad type posting via social media, and or they go ahead and put their resume out somewhere, and a fraudster gets a hold of that information and they reach out. And so oftentimes during that process, when the fraudster reaches out to the scam victim, is they're asking them for personal identifying information pretty early on during this supposed interview process. So they're asking for things like your social security number, date of birth, bank routing and account information. Oftentimes now they're asking for online banking credentials directly. Certainly a red flag indicator when you're asked that type of information. In addition, with these cases, the contact is usually using like a generic email, a designation like a Gmail account or that type of thing, or they are soliciting victims via some unknown social media profile. So it's kind of unusual to see that with a legitimate job offer. This is almost always what I see is that contact information raising those red flags. The solicitation also wants you to kind of, blindly, start the job, kind of a blind offer right away, and they want you to start. And they may want you to start by accepting payments on behalf of their business for customers that are going to be provided to you. Ultimately, the instructions will be to wire those funds or liquidate those funds in some fashion back over to the fraudster. In many cases, we also see things that are kind of loaded with the grammatical or awkward sentence structure. One of the things I see often is it's fairly common that these are solicited via overseas. So the fraudsters are typically residing overseas. So you'll see that awkward sentence structure and things that don't sound like what somebody in the United States would sound like, especially at the very end when you have something that says kindly respond. If they use the word kindly, chances are it's a fraud. It's just that difference in terms of how that sentence structure works for, and some things that you can look for. We also see things like vague or unusual qualifications, like, okay, we need the excellent customer service. Well, what does that mean, right? Or the fraudster is just blatantly saying, in order to perform this job, you need your own account, and they will ask for all of that information. It's kind of the old adage too, that if it sounds too good to be true, chances are it is. It is often great pay for little work. The job, of course, is going to be accepting payments oftentimes, or they're sending you an advance of some sort for performing a task. And again, what's going to be the common point here is, they're going to send you that check, and they're going to go ahead and request that money be sent back in some fashion. Whenever that presents itself with some kind of job offer or solicitation, it's going to be fraudulent. Some of the things we also see too is that when people apply for a job or there's a job offer, whether it's full-time, part-time, whatnot, there's usually regular pay intervals that are discussed, and there's some kind of income tax information that would be collected, for those things. With these schemes, they sort of don't bother with that pesky detail. So If you see that type of thing come up, it's certainly a red flag indicator, and it's most likely going to be fraudulent. Here's kind of the don't become a victim bullet points. And we want to make sure that people don't become victims to these types of scenarios. So the nevers are out there, of course. Never provide your personal information, personal identifying information, accounts, or online banking information to someone else. Chances are it's going to be a fraud scheme that you're unwittingly a part of. Never deposit a check from someone you are truly not familiar with. And never withdraw funds and send money back when you receive an unknown check. Whether it's a cash withdrawal, gift card purchase, Venmo, or other type of cash app, don't fall for it. It's going to be a scam offer. And of course, if for some reason you encounter this type of situation, and if you're unsure if the check is real or the circumstances surrounding how you received the check, feel free to stop by your local branch and ask for assistance. We'd be happy to discuss the matter with you and provide guidance as well. Next scheme. The next one that I wanted to talk about is the wire transfer overpayment types of scenarios that come our way. And what we're seeing in these cases is oftentimes the victim might carry larger balances. So they already have assets, unlike the fake check schemes where that is being sent and it's worthless. These fraudsters are trying to exploit customers that have those assets. And the balances are known to the fraudster because they're being convinced to supply that information directly to the fraudster. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works. And of course, the third point, what remains pretty consistent in these types of frauds is that there's a lot of sense of urgency that's discussed with the fraudster. The fraudster will say, hey, this is how you need to do this. You need to do this immediately. There's a sense of urgency to the offer as well. So certainly a red flag indicator. And next slide. The anatomy of this type of overpayment scam by wire is, and that's the thing that I wanted to kind of preface here, is that the end game is the fraudster ultimately convincing a victim to wire funds to someone else. It could be a domestic wire. It could be an overseas wire. The majority of the cases I've seen on the trending seem to be foreign wire transfers. But that's not always the case. But we're seeing the caller claiming to be from Amazon, Microsoft, or some other IT-related service, or a victim might actually receive a pop-up scam advertisement on their computer that says, hey, call us to update your antivirus software, or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of different variations, but either those two are very common in terms of how the fraud is perpetrated. And what they'll say, just for example, it might be Microsoft or Amazon. A real common one is Amazon. They'll contact the victim and say, yes, we realize that there's fraud on an account, and you are ultimately, you are entitled to a credit. And we're going to walk you through that, and we're going to make sure that your account gets credited as it needs to be. And if we could just go back one slide for just a moment. Thanks. Gaining access to the victim's computer or online banking credentials. In nearly all the cases, we're seeing that where the fraudster can be savvy and they convince victims to provide either remote access to their computer or online banking credentials to help facilitate the fraud. And that's under the guise of a credit or refund. So what the what the fraudster will say is, for example, let's say they tell the victim that, hey, you are entitled to a $300 credit. Whether it's an overpayment on a antivirus software or fraud on an Amazon account or whatever they say, there's 100 different variations of it. But what they all have in common is the fraudster sometimes will actually show them screenshots of their online banking, and they'll do some account-to-account type transfers, and they'll make it appear like an error has occurred. And of course, it's a major overage error. So instead of me as a fraudster crediting you $300, I inadvertently credited you $30,000. So they can provide false screen prints and the like to try to convince the victim that they wrongfully received these funds in error. And after they convince the victim to do that an overpayment was made, then they kind of flip the switch and say, "Yep, we're not able to reverse that payment that you originally received. So in order to rectify this, we require the difference to be refunded by wire transfer." And the fraudsters are savvy enough where they want to be able to also fool bank staff. So when a victim comes in, they're already advising the victim on what to say to the customer. So they're not saying, "Hey, I overpaid Amazon," or "I overpaid for antivirus software." They'll say, "Hey, tell them it's an investment." That'll expedite the process. Tell the bank that it's an investment, or it's to help somebody in need, or it's for the purchase of property. Various excuses, and that sense of urgency comes into play also, where they are basically demanding that this money be sent back immediately. Last one that I wanted to talk about is the emerging fraud trend that I see a lot of these cases that I work directly on. And these are unemployment fraud or CARES Act fraud, which is just increased exponentially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And what's common with this scam is of course victims are ultimately recruited to be used as money mules. Oftentimes I'm seeing this where the victim meets somebody online via social media or by interacting with some kind of fake profile, and it's amazing how long the victims are basically courted before they're even asked to accept payment. 3 to 12 months is what we're seeing on a typical case. So the victim feels very familiar with this person. They've never actually met them in person, but they feel very comfortable. So then come, 12 months later, they start asking for account information or other personal identifying information as well from the victim. And they start talking about needing a favor to accept payments. And these are legitimate payments from the perspective where they're receiving ACH transfers. They're not receiving a fake check. They're receiving what I would call real funds. But the funds are obtained fraudulently. So we're seeing cases where most of the fraud is where the victim is convinced to accept ACH payments, predominantly from out-of-state unemployment insurance. And so that's being set up, kind of in the background. So they perpetrate the fraud. Other individuals may be responsible for filing the bogus unemployment returns. And then there's another group of fraudsters that recruit the money mules to ultimately transfer funds for their benefit. In addition to that, sometimes we're seeing bank-to-bank ACH transfers that come in, or Cash App type payments from other money mules that are suddenly flooding that account. and they're advising that person, the victim, then go ahead and liquidate those funds. So we're seeing a lot of things that look like this. I see here's some common ones that I see. They're not all inclusive, but we'll see things from the state of Massachusetts. That's kind of a generalized look of what it may appear on somebody's statement. So Massachusetts, Tennessee, Ohio, Colorado, those are some big states that we seem to see often with these types of situations, and we monitor for this type of activity. And if we believe a customer is mixed up in this type of fraud, and oftentimes they're just simply unwitting participants, they have no idea that they're being utilized as a money mule. So then we reach out to them and start asking questions and advise them on how to stop receiving these payments. Basic anatomy of this fraud is, an online friend really wants you to and your account to accept these types of deposits, and they will be asking for that personal and account information to be able to accept those payments. And secondly, they might actually be utilizing your personal account information for other frauds and schemes, or selling that information to other fraudsters. Once again, we're looking at urgent requests to withdraw cash, Cash App, Venmo, or the purchase of Bitcoin, or urgent requests for electronic transfers, to somebody else right away. It could also be the fraudster requesting that you go and purchase gift cards, stored value cards that they can use very quickly. Oftentimes, a fraudster will just simply ask for the serial numbers for that stored value card, especially gift cards like Walmart or Home Depot, gift cards that can be utilized very, very easily. And as soon as they gather that information, they can just go ahead and go online and start making purchases immediately using that stored value. Some of the statistics, too, that are somewhat interesting when you talk about dealing with individuals or unknown individuals via social media. This is a neat statistic where, 63% of these fake accounts that are out there are created just simply by duplicating profiles from real users. So they can just simply rob various pictures, various types of information, and pose as that person, and then reach out to victims from that perspective. And with Facebook, we see a lot of frauds that are perpetrated via Facebook, where an unknown individual is trying to friend somebody, and then they go ahead and friend them, and it starts from there. A lot of Facebook Messenger conversations that go on. Or there's just an exchange of cell phone information, and then the texts go back and forth, video chats and the like. But 16% of these Facebook accounts are either fake or duplicates, and this comes from Facebook's research on this. So it's just kind of something to think about, that if you're truly unfamiliar with a person, you want to think twice about this, because this is a common avenue that fraudsters use to reach out to victims. And of course, we're here for you. Contact us or your other financial institution, depending on where you bank, if you suspect that a fraud has occurred. And obviously, circumstances can vary from case to case. So it's hard to say exactly what steps need to be performed. As far as a step A, B, and C, we have to kind of assess what type of fraud has occurred. But we have a fraud squad, which has a team of individuals that are a resource for our branches to go ahead and assist customers that may be victims of a fraud or may have inadvertently supplied information, and they're worried about that. So we can discuss those next steps with individuals, like logins, passwords, PINs, having a passcode on your bank account. That's a service that we offer where the customer can set up a personalized passcode to protect their accounts. So in case somebody tries to call in, trying to, gather information fraudulently, that we can use that information to positively verify our customers. Could include, our strategy could include closing and reopening of accounts, contacting the credit bureaus if necessary, filing a case through the Federal Trade Commission if somebody is truly a victim of identity theft, or it may be a case where it might be beneficial for customers to contact their local police department and file a complaint. Credit bureau fraud alerts. This is something that many of us are familiar with, but here's some general information on that. Is that depending on the nature of the fraud, this can certainly help. This can help stop fraudsters from obtaining credit in your name and so forth. So it's not always necessary in all cases because we don't want to inconvenience people. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis in which we recommend this bureau alert. And as I mentioned before, the Federal Trade Commission has a very detailed procedure on how to report identity theft, how to, initiate a recovery plan and so forth to get victims of identity theft out of that situation. And the identitytheft.gov site is certainly a great resource for that. And with some of the services that we offer, these are great services that you can utilize that can protect you from suspicious activity in general from occurring, like our card manager or card valet services that keep a track on unusual transactions that may occur. The same thing goes for our debit card fraud alerts that can alert you, and you can set those alerts and customize those alerts as well. And with online and mobile banking, alerts can also be utilized so you can really keep track on what's going on in your banking. And we'd be happy to help you with those services. Feel free to stop in to one of our branches, and we'd be happy to explain those services or help assign you up for those as well. And some of the protecting of the information is, it's kind of the common sense thing that you want to utilize all the time is don't share personal private information in general. Shredding sensitive papers is something that we've talked about many times, but it really does add up. I mean, if you look around in some of your drawers at home or things that are in your desk drawer, it's amazing how much sensitive information is on there. And you can kind of see some of the things that we have set up with some of our upcoming shred days, which are also posted on our website as well. Feel free to take advantage of that because it really does clear out a lot of that clutter, and a lot of that information can be utilized by dumpster divers to obtain personal information. So, you want to do things like online banking to protect yourself. So you're always monitoring your account information and what's going on within your accounts. Same thing with regular monitoring of your credit reports, protecting your computer in general, protecting your mobile device or utilizing strong passwords. And keeping that in, your personal information personal and just be cognizant not to share that with others. It goes a long way in preventing fraud.
Okay, Dave, we do have a few questions that came in, so I'm going to go ahead and read these off for you. The first question is, aren't we providing personal account information anytime we write or send a check to someone?
I wouldn't call it personal information, but obviously it is account information in general. So if you are submitting a check, Sure, that check can be seen by others and so forth. But the point that I'm trying to make here is when we have somebody that's trying to solicit that information directly via social media or by phone, in general, we want to be cognizant of that being risky and just supplying that information kind of unannounced. But yeah, I mean, the check information is out there. You give your employer information and so forth. But there are legitimate business reasons why that information needs to be obtained. But in the cases that I discussed, you want to be wary about providing that information in those circumstances.
Okay, and then the next question is about online banking credentials. What do you mean by that? Does that mean your password? What are online banking credentials?
Yeah, I apologize for not clarifying that. What we mean by the online banking credentials is everything that you would need to physically log into your online banking. So that'll be your username and that will be your password. So anything that the fraudster needs to physically access your account via that online mechanism through online banking.
Yeah, and that may also include those challenge questions that you may receive periodically. I think you answer 3 questions. If it doesn't recognize a device, you pre-program what those questions and answers are through your online banking. So that is information too you definitely don't want to share with anyone else.
Correct.
The next question is Venmo safe?
It is. I mean, in my personal opinion, I mean these are legitimate services, and I don't mean to, potentially say that they're not. They are safe applications, and they serve legitimate purposes. Like many things, they can be misused by fraudsters, and because it's easy to set up and it's easy to transfer money. Relatively quickly, the fraudsters are using that as kind of a preferred mechanism.
Okay. Got a couple more questions coming in here. The next one is some other banks allow a PIN to be sent to a phone to gain access to transfer money to a new account. Does Bank First have that?
I'm not personally, I'm not familiar enough with it yet. That's something I wish I could answer that question outright. But certainly feel free to reach out to your branch or banker that you normally deal with, and I think they're going to be better suited to answer that question. I apologize that I don't have the answer.
That's okay. We have another question here about shredding sites and looking for a Zaki County. So I can probably help answer that one. Right now, what we have on our website and what we shared on the previous screen, those are the shredding sites that we have secured this year. I know we're having a couple of conversations and looking to do something at our Cedarburg office, possibly. So we're trying to confirm dates for that. So the best way to, either ask your office if they have any news or check our website for updated dates and locations for that. A couple more questions here. When a computer service person wants to access my computer remotely, can they see any of my personal information?
Well, the short answer is, is yes. It depends on what they're doing within the system. If you are if you are watching somebody legitimately, like let's say you really are utilizing a service, you can watch what they're doing within your computer once you provide that remote access. But short answer is yes. If you're not paying attention, they can go through files and things of that nature and see anything that you would normally access. But what I like to do is, when I mess up my computer at home, and if I call for remote access through my local provider here, I kind of watch what they do. I'm there watching to see what they're doing and making sure that it makes sense, that the things that they're doing seem to point to correcting my problem and not just perusing my sensitive files.
This one is kind of related to that. When someone has access to your computer, perhaps remote access, or maybe someone you feel like is just logged in, when you are online, is it best to just shut your computer down or restart your computer after that service person does that?
That's an outstanding question, and yes, it's not a bad idea just to simply shut your computer down. And once, if people believe that they have been victimized in some fashion, I recommend, and so does many of us. We would just recommend that. Your computer actually be professionally scrubbed, or the device that you were utilizing be professionally scrubbed, because you just want to make sure that nobody was able to go in and inadvertently, do something bad, install malware, or some other spyware within your computer as well. So if you believe that or you're suspicious of that, it's always a good idea just to go in and have a reputable company perform that sweep.
Great. Two more questions here. Does Bank First offer two-step authentication for consumer checking accounts? I'm not quite sure exactly. I don't know, Dave, if you know exactly what he's asking here.
I'm not for sure, but I will say this, is that Bank First does have procedures in place in terms of, if individuals call or whatnot and they're requesting consumer information, is there are various authentication mechanisms that are in place. And those mechanisms are what we call out of wallet type of questions, which are easy for a real customer to answer, but very difficult for the fraudster to answer. Savvy fraudsters possess things called in wallet questions. They can answer those questions. They can answer who your employer is. They can answer the date of birth question, address, last four digits of the social security number. So there is a procedure in place that really mix that type of thing up and ask those out of wallet questions to best identify our customers.
Great. If I use a different computer to log into my account, does the bank computer recognize that?
Short answer is, in general, it could. There are banks, and certainly, and certainly us. We have various backroom mechanisms that can detect unusual activity. Again, it's hard to say for sure depending on the circumstances, but there are things in place that are kind of backroom operations that are designed to potentially detect that type of fraudulent activity, and also reach out to customers to validate in those types of situations.
Okay. And I think this is the last question. If I put passwords in my cell phone directory, can anyone access those passwords through the cloud?
I don't know 100% for sure, because I'm just not a techie on that. The short answer on that is that you really don't want to store passwords in your cell phone or passwords in your PC. You want to use kind of a professional password storage service. That's kind of my best advice, is that I try not to keep those things in a device that could potentially be accessed. I wish I could be a little more specific for you, but I think the short answer is yes, possibly that could be accessed, but I'm not sure about how that works from a cloud service standpoint. But in general, it could be accessed if your device itself was compromised.
Great. Well, we appreciate all the questions that everyone has submitted so far. If you have any additional questions that you want to ask following the webinar, we do have an email address here. It's called infobox@bankfirstwi.bank that you can email those questions and we'll get back to you. Or, of course, you can always reach out to your local Bank First office. We want you and appreciate any feedback that you can give to us about this webinar. Like I said earlier, you'll be receiving an email with a link to tonight's presentation, as well as a link to a quick survey. So if you complete that survey, you will automatically be entered to win a $100 Visa gift card. We really want to get your feedback to know what information we can provide to you for future webinars, or just general education on fraud topic as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and be safe.